My name is Naya Fidenti, and you guys were with my friend Josh last time as you were exploring the internet and what makes up a web page. This time we'll be exploring the surface of what HTML can actually do, how to set up a file, like an HTML file, and how to get started creating your website. So the first thing we're going to do is create a REPL account. And Josh mentioned this last time, but REPL is where we'll be using, where we'll be accessing our code, and we'll be storing all of our files on this site. So as you can see here, just go to repl.it, that's repl.it, and at first you're gonna have to create an account. So I'm just gonna log out quick, and you'll see a screen like this. And first you just want to click sign up to make sure that you're good. And you have options like you can log in with Google, or you can just create an account. You'll have to provide an email, and I already have an account, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. Once you have an account, you can use your username and password, or log in with Google if you did that. And you should see a screen that looks like this, where you've got a sidebar, and these are the languages that you would have had to input as you were creating your account. So to create a REPL, you can either click the language you want here, or you can click this blue plus sign in the top right corner, and they just want you to tell them which language you're using. We're using HTML, CSS, and JS. Remember, we're not learning JavaScript, we're learning HTML and CSS, but it's all going to be included in the same file. And then you're just going to go ahead and give your file a name. So I'm going to go with HTML tag demo. You can give it whatever you want, probably a descriptive one, and this will be your file. So go ahead and maybe pause the video here, make sure that you've created a REPL account and that you're able to access this file. Again, it's really important that you select the language as HTML and CSS, otherwise REPL won't know how to interpret the code that you type. You want to tell it that you're typing in HTML code. Also, make sure you do create an account. Some people like to go with the default, and I think it lets you create a few files without making an account, but it won't save your work, so make sure you create the account. So once you have this set up, we're going to talk about what all this means in a little bit, and we'll get started creating the code in a little bit. But once you have your REPL set up, we're going to just talk about what HTML actually is. So it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. That's just a fancy way of saying that you're marking up certain parts of the code as elements, and hypertext refers to links, since your web pages are going to be linked to each other. And the HTML is used to add structure and content to a web page. So, for example, the links here, or the buttons here, the text, more buttons, this image over here, these icons are all images. That's all content, and that is what you'd code with the HTML. CSS is used to style, and we'll get into that in a bit. So CSS would let you make this background over here yellow, or change the colors of things, change sizes of things. So CSS is something that we'll get into later, but first we want to get the actual content onto the page. So how do you add content? Every part of your page is divided up into elements. So for example, a paragraph element, denoted by this P tag over here, has a start and an end tag, and then the content of the paragraph is put between the tags. So in this case, the entire paragraph element consists of the start tag to tell the browser that you're starting to add code that's going to be a paragraph. And then the actual content, this is like what the paragraph will be, this is what will show up on the page. And then the end tag to tell the browser that you're done ending your paragraph. This end tag is really important. If you don't add it, the browser doesn't know you stopped adding a paragraph. And now if you try to add more code, it'll get confused because it won't know how to display the text that you're showing. So you always want to make sure that you tell the browser that some text is of a certain type by enclosing it within a start and an end tag. Now, there are exceptions to this. Some tags don't have a start and an end tag, but we will get into those as they come. Most elements do have a start and an end tag, though, and the content is between them. So I will show you an example real quick over here. So if I want to make a paragraph, I just do P for paragraph, And this is my opening tag. So it's got this like angle bracket, like a less than sign, P for paragraph, and then this greater than sign is like the closing part of that tag. And then I can just get paragraph text. And then the closing tag is the same exact thing as the opening tag, but it's got a backslash. So the backslash just means that it's a closing tag and not an opening tag, because you want to be able to differentiate. Are you starting the paragraph or are you ending the paragraph? So you use this backslash over here. So if you run this, then this paragraph shows up. And there are different types of elements that we'll get into a little bit. So like H1 would be a heading, and then it portrays it as a heading, not as a paragraph. So the type of element is really important, and the type of element is denoted by what you put inside of your opening and closing tags. These are also called start and end tags, by the way. Okay, so those are the parts of an element. The main thing that we will get into later as well is the attribute and the values. These will allow you to specify certain types of information about your tag. So for example, if you were adding an image, you tell the computer where to get the image by using attributes. And in this case, it's telling the computer that this class of the paragraph is called foo. There are all sorts of attributes and values. You can use them to specify widths and heights and styling. But just know that if you want to add attributes and values, those go in the start tag. You want to declare all of that stuff before you actually add your content. So all of that will go in the start tag. So what are the actual tags that make up an HTML page? That would be all the stuff that REPL gives you by default. So if you were creating a new file on your computer, you would just start with a blank file. You wouldn't have all of this by default. REPL gives all this to you by default, but we're going to go step by step and make sure you know what all this was so that you can start it from scratch if you ever needed to. So the first thing is this doc type declaration. And the doc type basically just declares to the browser that this is HTML, and it specifies like the type of HTML that it is. So it's always good programming practice to include the doc type string in there. And then the next part of the tag of the page is enclosed within these HTML tags. Notice how all of my text all of my code is within these HTML tags. That's because all of this is HTML text, right? So remember how we always had start tags and end tags, and then the stuff between the tags was the actual element? That's true for HTML as well. So all of your HTML code should go between a start HTML tag to tell the computer you're starting to write HTML, and an end HTML tag to tell the computer that you're done with your HTML code. So once you have your HTML tags, you go a bit further in and you see the head. The head contains what's called metadata. Metadata is a fancy word for all of the information that exists about the page. Not what goes on the page, but information about the page. So for example, in here you might specify an attribute that REPL doesn't give you by default, but it would be lang for language equals en to specify that this is English, that the page is in English. This meta charset equals UTF-8. That basically specifies the character encoding of the page. Now you can read more about that through the Thinkific, and I will provide a link in the transcript that's in the description of this video. But the character encoding basically just tells the computer that certain codes should be interpreted into English letters instead of any other character encoding set. This we can actually get rid of for now, but it basically specifies, it's another piece of metadata, and it specifies how to view the device width. So we can go ahead and get rid of this. And the title. The title is what shows up in the top over here of, like, it's your tab name. It's the page's name, and that shows up as the tab. So for example, the title of this Google Slides is, Google Slides page is WebDev-chapter 1 through 6. The title of this page is Code for Tomorrow. And here we can go ahead and change the title to cat. I don't know, I like cats. You'll see that a lot. And if we open this in a new tab, we'll see that the title of the page is in fact cat. So the way REPL works is it will show you what the page looks like in this little viewport over here. But if you actually want to see the entire thing as a website, you have to click open in a new tab, and it will give it to you. This is the link that you can share with all your friends to show them your work, and this is the title of the page. So remember, that's also in the head because you want that to load before the rest of the content, and title element with an opening tag, the actual title, and then the closing tag. This link we don't have to worry about right now, but it's going to be a link to this file over here, which will contain styling code, like colors and borders and things like that in the future once we get around to adding styling. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And then remember an ending head tag, because you want to tell the browser that you're done with your metadata, you're done specifying all of the information about the page. Now you want to go ahead and actually tell it what's on the page. So all of this information gets enclosed between these head tags, and then you can go on to the body. Now the body is the place where you actually store your content. So this would be JavaScript. If you wanted to add JavaScript code into your site, we can go ahead and get rid of that for now. But right now, all we have on our page is this heading. And let's go ahead. It says paragraph text, but it's a heading. We can go ahead and add a paragraph too, just to make this site a little bit more interesting. Now we have two pieces of content on our page, two elements, the heading and the paragraph, and those go between the body tags. You don't want to add it here. This is what you don't want to do. You don't want to put it here because it will still run, because it sees this text and it sees that it's within the HTML tags, and it just assumes that it should put it on the page. But this is terrible coding practice, because you never know if your browser is you never know how your browser is going to interpret it, and you cannot do stuff, like you couldn't style this because it's not enclosed within the body tag. And there's a lot of things that you couldn't do with it because you're not specifying specifically that it's content. So you always want to make sure that that all of your elements are within the two body tags. That is good programming practice. And I've been referencing good programming practice a lot. What does that actually mean? That means that you want your, if anyone else reads your code, you want them to be able to easily understand what's going on. So if all of this is in the body, they can easily understand that it's content that you should be able to style and you should be able to modify. And it's part of the sort of the meat and potatoes, to quote Josh from last time, of the site. And you want them to know that all of this is metadata, that's part of the head, and that all of this is HTML code. And the way you make this known visually is through indenting. So if I did something like this, this is not good programming practice, because it's very unclear which things are contained in which elements. Here, the head is on different levels, the body's on the same level, but the things within the body are on different levels. So was this supposed to be contained in something? Is it missing something? You don't know. So you always want the things within your container to have the same indenting. So notice how everything within the head is at the same position, one tab after the actual head elements. You've got the body tags on the same level, and everything within the body is one tab in. The HTML is right on the outside, lined up with the top, like front of the page. So it's all nice and organized. That way it's clear which things are in which containers. And this might not seem like it's relevant now, but when you start having really huge web pages, you want to be able to organize. And this also applies for if you had a really long paragraph. So if you had something like this, notice how the line had to wrap around. You don't want to do that either. You want to make sure that your lines are nice and neat. Maybe put a little break here. That way it's on two separate lines and it's not trying to wrap around. And notice how I did the indenting thing again, because since I'm taking up more than one line, I want everyone who's reading my code to know that this is my paragraph and all of this is within the paragraph. So when I render it, it all renders as one line. Why is that? Why did this not just render as two separate lines? Because there's a space. That's because HTML knows, like the browser knows, that whenever you press enter, you're probably just trying to make your code look more organized. Like notice how we have all these random indents here. We don't want to actually print the indents. We just want it to look nice when we write our code. So it actually ignores all of this white space over here. Like if I took this space out, that doesn't change this content. It ignores everything here. If you want to actually make a break, you use the BR tag. BR for break, and that will put a line break in your paragraph and show that you wanted a new line. So that's the way you add new lines. You don't just press enter. Pressing enter will make the computer think that you're trying to organize the code, which is good practice, but you don't want it to actually translate into a line break. So don't worry about what you do with your code here, just worry about what elements you're using, and because that specifies the actual content of the page. So one more thing about good HTML style is comments. So if we go down here and we take a look at comments, they're used to make code more readable or explain it to other humans, not computers. So the computer actually won't be able to understand your comment. It will completely ignore your comment. So if I want to tell it heading, notice how the text, this is a heading, didn't show up on my screen. And REPL actually tells you that it's a comment by sort of italicizing it and making it gray and fade it out to emphasize that the computer will ignore this text. This is purely for other humans who are looking at your code. So this is your way of telling other people that, hey, I'm adding a heading. Or if you want to specify, like maybe to yourself, just a reminder that, like, I don't know, add more later. Like if you were working on this as a project and you want to tell yourself to add more later, you can go ahead and just leave a comment. Or if you had like some complicated organizational patterns and you want to specify like which boxes go with which things, which will actually become more relevant as we start adding things like div elements, then you might want to specify comments to explain to yourself, to your future self, or to other people what you're actually doing and what your code is trying to do. So again, when you run this, the text within the comments doesn't change. So how do you add a comment? It's this less than sign, like the sort of like we're starting a starting tag, and then exclamation point, and then 2 dashes, not 1 but 2 dashes, and then this is your comment. I'm specifying HTML comment because CSS comments are actually different, and then 2 dashes again, and this little greater than sign to end the comment. Remember, you want to make sure you end the comment with this. So this is the sort of like arrows, except this one has an exclamation mark, and that's how you add a comment. And you want to make sure that you're using them appropriately to specify what your code is doing. So the last thing about good programming practice is these attribute and value pairs. Whenever you specify attributes, so for example, the attribute of head is the language, that's English, you want to make sure that your value is contained in those quotation marks. So if I took these out, this is no longer a value. This is the attribute. You're making it equal something else, but values are always contained in quotation marks to specify that the thing within the quotation marks is the actual value. It's got some sort of like name. Even if you later when we do images and we do things like widths and heights, the widths would always be within the quotation marks, and that's just a common way of adding information about the element. So we got all of that, and the last thing. So notice how I used a break over here. I could have also done this. So remember, the computer will ignore this space, so I can put that there for organizational purposes. And I can actually put this all in the same line if I'm making a small paragraph. Then I can just put that all in the same line. So notice how here between paragraphs, I do have a really large space. That had nothing to do with this. So if I took that out too, it's still going to be there because the browser knows that these are 2 separate elements completely, so it's trying to put a bit of space. That's different from just this tiny line break over here. So notice how even if I put this on the same line, it will still be on the next line because it's a separate element. So it's always good practice to put it on the next line in your code, just to clarify that they're two separate elements. But a common rule of thumb is that if you're including one paragraph, one sentence, like one idea sort of, even if you want to make a line break, you don't want to just make it a different element. You want each different element to contain a different set of ideas. If this is just the same sentence but with a line break, use the BR tag. Don't do something like this. Just to clarify, do not do what I'm about to do. So if I just took this out, now it's two separate paragraphs, but there's a larger space between them because the computer thinks they're separate elements. You didn't want it to be elements. You want separate elements. You want it to be the same sentence. So one paragraph element, but with a line break in it. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies the difference between, different elements and just using a line break. So now we're going to talk about what the elements actually are. So we're going to talk about headings first. And here at the bottom, notice our trusty little paragraph tag, P for paragraph. But the headings go from heading 1 through heading 6. And they basically go in height order, or like font size order. So heading 1 is the largest, that would be your main heading. Heading 2 would be like a subheading. Heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6, they'd all get smaller. So obviously here in practice, here you see that they're getting smaller. So if you want a smaller heading, you can just use a smaller tag, like you'd use one of the H4, H5, H6 tags instead of H1 if you just wanted a smaller heading. However, when we learn CSS and when we learn how to style these things and we learn how to change the sizing, you're going to want to use CSS to change the sizing and not one of these. So the way this is supposed to work is these are subheadings. So for example, H1 might be foods, and then H2 would be like a subcategory. So that might be like, I don't know, dairy, sugar, meals. And then these would be even smaller subcategories. So like within dairy, you might have like milk, ice cream. And then H4 might be even smaller. So like within milk, you might have fat-free and whole milk. So these are supposed to be categorical to sort of show the organization of the pattern. So while you can use them for sizing, keep in mind that as we move forward, you'll be using them more for their meaning of, main heading, subheading, than for sizing. But for now, you can use them for sizing. So like if I want this to be smaller, I can just change this to an H2. And now it's a subheading of H2. And remember, they go from H1 to H6. And there's also the paragraph tag, which we learned about, that will just add normal looking text that we will be able to change later. So now we're going to talk about some text formatting tips, because this is all great, but let's be honest, this looks kind of boring, and we want to spice things up a bit. So first, we're going to talk about the bold tag. It's a pretty common one. So here, you can just notice that we've got B for bold. And remember, we always want to use the start tag, end tag format. So this is the start tag to tell the computer that we're starting to make things bold. This is the end tag to tell the computer we're done making something bold. So now if we run this, really is bolded because it's within the bold tags. If we wanted to make it italic, we do I for italic. So if we change those B's to I's, this becomes italic. And if we want to underline it, we can do U for underline. And now it has underlined freely. And okay, there are different ways of doing this. So for example, strong, the strong tags will also make this bold. However, be careful with this, because when you use the strong tags, you're telling the computer that it's important. It displays important text bolded, but you can, later on we'll learn how to change this so that even though you're using a strong tag, it doesn't actually bold the text. You can change it to do something else. So the default is to bold the text. But this is also telling the computer that it's important. So if other programs are, say, looking at your page and trying to extract the important information, it will, one of the things it might look for are strong tags. So if something's not actually important, but you just want it to be bold, you want to make sure you use the B tag instead of the strong tag. Strong tags are reserved for meaning. They're called semantic, and it means that it's important, not just that you're playing around and trying to make something look bold. So that also applies for italics. You can make something look italic for fun, but then you can also make something look italic because you really want to emphasize it. So if you truly want to emphasize it, then you can use the EM tags. And that contains meaning, not just formatting. And same for underline. If you want to show that it was like an insertion, then it will display with an underline, but the underlying meaning behind it, what the browser interprets that as, is that you added text later and you want to emphasize that you're adding it in. So just like that, there are also different tags. So you can use DEL for delete, and that will show up as a strike through, which shows that you're trying to delete that text or that you wanted to delete that text. You can use mark, which will highlight the text. It stands for marked text. You can use small, which, as I'm sure you can guess, will make this slightly smaller. Again, you'll be able to change font sizes as well as we move into styling, but the small tag is a good way of just making something look slightly smaller. And one of the main things that you might want to do are subscripts and superscripts. Obviously, if you're doing it for an entire word, it's not really helpful. Like a subscript will make it, will display it a bit lower, and superscript, SUP for super, will display it a bit higher. But you'll actually care about things like that when the formatting requires it. So for example, I'm sure you guys have heard of chemistry like H2O, hydrogen to oxygen. But we all know that H2O actually should be rendered like this, with this 2 below the H sort of. So if you're trying to display things like that and you want to specify subscripts and superscripts, then you can use these tags, and they're actually quite helpful. So we're just going to do a quick recap of what we just learned to make sure that we can apply this and make our sites look a bit more interesting. So I'm going to go through the fruits page. The goal is just to recreate the site that we see here. So we'll just go step by step and figure out what's required to change the site to make it look like this. So the first thing we see is that the title is called warm up. So instead of cat, notice how if we open this in a new tab, it says cat. The first thing we want to do is change the title, make it say warm up. And now if we run this and open it in a new tab, we see that the title of the page is warm up. Great. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of this. That way we can start from scratch. So now we've got a blank thing. We can go ahead. First thing is the main header, fruits. And we remember which tag that was, right? That's the H1 tag. That's the largest one, and it's the main one. And I can't spell. So remember, opening tag with no backslash, our content, and then the closing tag, the closing tag with the backslash. So now if we run this, we have our main header, fruits. Perfect. So now we have this entire paragraph. So we'll go step by step. It says, I like orange, but lemons are the greatest things to ever survive, exist. Let's see if I can remember that. I like oranges, things exist, survive. Right? Is that right? Yes. Okay. So, and I will add the H2O is vital. H2O is vital. Okay. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure that this follows good programming standards. So since this is really long, notice how the line is wrapping around. We can just put this on a new tab or on a new line, make sure our paragraph tags line up, and I'm going to just put an enter, I'm going to press enter there to specify that way these two will show up on different lines and the line isn't wrapping around. So now if I run that, we've got our text here. And H2O is vital seems to be on a new line. So I can put a break here, and I'm going to render this on a new line. That way it doesn't wrap around. Now the only reason I put this, I pressed enter here, again, even if I didn't, it would still show up on the new line here because of the break. The only reason I'm putting a line break here is for organizational purposes, for good coding style. Okay, so now we can go ahead and format this. I like oranges. Oranges is bold. What's the bold tag? Well, that was the B tag. We could have also used strong, remember, but strong is for meaning, and it doesn't seem like oranges is particularly important here. It's just playing around with styling. So we're going to stick to our B tags, and now we have oranges as bold. Let's keep going. So lemons has a highlight, and if you remember, that was the mark tag. All the tags will be in the transcript as well, and they're on the Thinkific. And remember, the transcript of this is just at the bottom of, like, it's in the description of the video, and it will also be on Thinkific, which Josh showed you last time. So if we mark this up, now lemons is highlighted. Perfect. Okay. We're going to keep going, and greatest is in italics. So the italics tag was I. So we're just going to put this word within the italics. So remember, when you're formatting things, you only need the word that's being formatted within the tags. So you're just going to enclose it within those tags. And now greatest is in italics. And exist has a strike through. Which was the one that gave us a strike through? Well, it's deleted text because it's implying that we want to get rid of this text, but we want to show that it was once there. So since we've got this del over there, now exist has a strike through. And okay, we've got a couple more. H2O has a subscript of 2, which we just saw. So remember, we want to make this 2 a subscript. That way it shows up a bit lower. And the last thing we need to do is make this look bold and italic. So how do we do that? We can make this bold, right? So this will be bold. And now we want the entire thing to be italic. So how do you think you would do it? Maybe pause here, try to figure it out. Well, it's pretty simple. We can just put the same tags around our entire bolded text. So now both the italics and the bold apply to this word over here. So now we have, if we just compare real quick, we got the bold, the highlight, italics, strike through, and our H2O is vital, is formatted correctly. And that would be an example of how you go about recreating a page. So now for practice, this is in the Thinkific, in chapter 2, and you're going to be trying to recreate this site. So we've got the animals, TM, got a few paragraphs here. Careful with the headings and look at the sizing, make sure that your spacing and your line breaks and all of your formatting is correct. So I will let you guys go ahead and try this, and you'll know you got it right when your website looks exactly like this. Careful with the title, and make sure that you guys also go ahead and do the chapter 2 quiz that you can find on the Thinkific. If you go to the Thinkific over here, you can review all of this content if you would like. We went over it, and if you go ahead and take the beginner's quiz just to make sure that you're good with all of the information we just learned, then you should be good for chapter 3. So let's recap. What did we learn today? We learned what HTML is. It's just the language we use to add structure and content to a web page. We learned the different tags within the code. Oh, what's wrong with this code? We never went over that. So if you look over here, I'll give you a minute, or pause the video, try to figure out what's wrong. And we're back. So remember we talked about good styling? The problem with this is that the HTML tag, the head, the body, and the paragraph are all on the same line. And the person who wrote this code probably did it just so that it all fits in the picture. But remember, when you're actually writing code, you want the head to be indented, just like this. You want the head to be inside of the HTML tags, one tab in. And then within that, you want the body to be in line with the head, because they're both within the HTML tag. But then you want all this stuff to be indented a bit so that it looks like this. you don't want it to look like this, because this, it's very unclear that these two are within the body. So just to reiterate, good styling is important, and as we make more complicated websites, you will be glad that all of your content is organized. And we learned how to comment things just to make sure that we're capable of understanding our own code, and all the different types of headings, 1 through 6, paragraph tags, and a whole bunch of formatting tags. So bold, italics, underlines, and a variety of different formatting tips. And we went through this recreation exercise, and remember, you have this one to try as well. And go make sure you take the chapter 2 quiz. Next time we'll be learning, in chapter 3, we'll be learning more HTML tags, as you can see. Just so you see what's in store for you, we got images, links, which are the heart of the internet, right? You want to be able to link to different pages so that you can combine them into one site. And we've got iframes, which are videos, like adding YouTube videos into your sites, lists, tables, entities, forms, and you'll be getting a whole lot of practice with that, because that is the meat of your site. That is what you want to add. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you let your teacher know. Make sure you do the practice, and you'll be like the live sessions will be available for you to ask any questions. So we will see you next video.